evening and welcome. Tonight on the show we're joined by FCCC CEO Mr. Joel Abraham, and good evening sir, thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
So tonight we're discussing the FCCC's role in and during the current pandemic. Of course, as we know, FCCC has stepped up its operations and a very important role to play in monitoring price control items and preventing price gouging. So talk to us about your current operations and how it's going.
Thank you, Zia. So what FCCC has done is continuing from our work last year. During the pandemic, we've continued certain programs. So yes, we've got our functions under the law to ensure that we set prices and enforce them, as well as monitor them and look for breaches. So those are the requirements under the FCCC Act. We've also got instances of items that are not price controlled. These are non-price control items where traders may artificially raise the price. This may be termed as price gouging. We are also doing supply chain disruption due to domestic containment zones and lockdowns. The movement of goods may be affected. For example, say the main hub for distribution for sugar is out of Lotoka mill in Lotoka, right? And so because there was a containment zone in Lotoka, Nindi, and then there was a checkpoint at Wainandoi and Delainevesi. So the movement of sugar out of Lotoka all the way into Suva, there may be some logistical disruptions. So we are assisting traders in ensuring that those logistical disruptions are verified and rectified, so that the supply of goods can continue. The other thing that we continued was our business assistance program, noting that the SME sector forms a major part of the Fijian economy. We also have continued our business assistance program where businesses facing any sort of issues can approach the FCCC and we will provide them assistance. Apart from that, we are also assisting the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Commerce, as well as the Fiji Police Force in ensuring that we enforce the COVID safety measures for businesses that are operating. Now, this includes things like social or physical distancing. It also looks at things like checking temperatures, checking for the Care Fiji app for those that do not have the app on, noting down their details, making sure that all these checks and balances are done, especially for contact tracing purposes. So the team has been out and about, and while everybody has slowed the operations or businesses have closed down, in the past 6 weeks alone, we've undertaken more than 2,300 inspections. And these are by our ground response teams on the field. They've been put everywhere in all towns and cities in Fiji. So what they do is on a daily basis, they go out and they make sure that one, we take a proactive measure in checking shops and supermarkets, as well as shops that are open. Two is responding to complaints. Keeping in mind, say we've got 2 people down in Singatoka. Singatoka is a huge area. So after our staff visits a particular area, it could be possible that the trader will increase the prices after our people have left. So what happens is we rely a lot on the Fijian public to be able to be our eyes and ears on the ground and report matters of breaches. So far we have identified close to 54 matters out of the 2,300 or so inspection. One, we are happy with the level of compliance because that sits at around 97.7% right now. Non-compliance 54 matters as a percentage of 2,300 is close to 2.3%. So level of non-compliance is less, but in real terms the number of businesses doing it has increased. If you look at particular areas, right, like Sawani, Manueni, these were areas outside the containment zone. We are able to go out and do inspections, and we noted a high degree of non-compliance. One thing that was worrying was traders in these areas thought the FCCC could not come out of the containment zone, and so they could do whatever they wanted. They thought Wild West rules apply. Unfortunately for them, the team was out and about. We have looked at the conduct. What was worrying is for fuel, specifically for fuel prices, there was a 36% non-compliant. For other items, we noted issues such as overcharging, failure to display prices, failure to issue receipts. So we've charging 11 traders in those areas. As far as all the other work is concerned, we have so far provided business assistance to various traders. For supply chain disruptions, we have managed to look at supply chain or logistical arrangements with about 76 different traders, ensuring that goods are able to move. Because sometimes what can happen is your business can send its truck, but it's coming at half a capacity, and whereas my business needs something. So in order to keep prices down and ensuring that we are able to manage the cost of this transportation, because the requirement is for drivers to be changed at borders. So in order to control the cost, what we've done is we've asked businesses to be able to consolidate their cargo and bring it. And so that helps quite a lot in stabilizing the prices.
Mr. Abraham, if we were to look at how the FCCC monitors price gouging, it's a two-point question.
Yeah.
One, how do you determine which items fall under the price control list? And
Sure.
two, when you say price gouging, are you looking at only items under the price control list or items outside of it?
Okay, thank you, Geraldine. That's a good question. Firstly, when we look at items to put under price control, these are policy measures. So what we do is periodically we undertake a review and say which item should fall under price control. Now, the intention of price control is to ensure that there is a lower echelon in the society that we want to protect and ensure that they have affordability to basic amenities, right? Have access to basic food items. As such, we regulate prices of infrastructure, we regulate prices of utilities like electricity, and we also regulate prices of food items, amongst other things, right? Pharmaceutical, hardware, so on and so on. So there's quite a lot of items that we do place under price control. The manner in which we do it, we undertake a market study, we see what items are needed. So there may be a category, say edible oil, right? But we will not put the entire category under price control. We will look at what is the affordability of the people, what is the product that is in high demand, right? So, for example, if we look at edible oil or cooking oil, mostly people buy canola oil, soybean oil. So these are the two items that are usually purchased. Right? Then of course there are higher end premium products like extra virgin olive oil, right? Locally produced extra virgin coconut oil. So what we do is we do not place these premium products under price control. It's similar for things like rice. So you've got the long grain rice that's under price control. Okay? Things like jasmine rice is not placed under price control, right? So you've got things like basmati rice is not under price control. There's a misconception that, and somebody wrote to me and said, why aren't you controlling jasmine rice? It's made in Fiji. Jasmine rice is actually not made in Fiji. It's purchased out of Vietnam and Thailand and it's milled here in Fiji. It's processed by FMF or Punjas. So we will still be looking at the prices of these products being pegged to international commodity prices. And if anybody has done their research, a simple Google will help you. Yesterday CNN reported, and that's a reputable media company, they've reported that the UN food price index rose by 40% over the period of 12 months. And these are commodity prices, so you've got rice, soybean oil, corn, etc. Right? Or if somebody goes to the IMF website, you look at IMF reporting in 2017, there was an article that said from 2006 till 2017, IMF has noticed a increase of about 45% across food prices. So it is, those are the inflationary impact on commodity prices. Now when it comes to Fiji, the role of the FCCC is to ensure, one, affordability, that everybody is able to buy things, right? Low, middle income earners, right? There are those who are high income earners, right? Say if Ziad is on a high income, right? Why should he be able to benefit out of price control if he's got the ability to pay? So the products that he purchases should be on market, determined by market forces. That is what we call a market-based economy. So we do a thorough market study and we classify products under price control, right? And if you look at the products and some products that we have under price control.
We'll go to a short break. Actually, this is because this is actually a major subject. A lot of people have been talking about, in general, the high cost of buying food and going shopping. So when we come back from a break, we'll carry on the discussion. So stay with us for that. Mr. Ibrahim, when we left off in the last segment, we were talking about the increase in the price of food. There are some media companies as well as politicians, people on social media have been talking about this a lot. And as such, the question that always comes up is the role of the FCCC in maintaining and controlling these prices. So people have also been claiming that it's some companies or some retailers that are making bigger profits, selling items at higher profit margins, and many consumers have therefore been complaining about prices having gone up. So how much of it is markup inflation and how much of it is because of global market trends?
Yeah, Ziad, as I was explaining, the market, it works in a very sophisticated way, right? But if you try and condense it and simplify it, it's basically we purchase a lot of goods internationally, and if prices of commodities have increased internationally, it will translate into increased prices in Fiji. Now, of course, people will go around saying what they think is okay. I mean, politicians is a different ball game altogether. No one can probably answer what they say and why they say it. Most recently in Parliament, there was discussions of deregulation of fuel prices, right? So don't regulate it anymore. The manner in which FCCC decides to regulate is, our role is to study the market and see whether a particular item should or should not be under price control, or should not be regulated, and we make a recommendation. We decide that independently and make a recommendation to the minister. And once our order is issued, then we go around policing or enforcing it, assessing what the prices should be or what reasonable prices should be. Now, the absence of price control, or say if we went for deregulation and a lot of products were taken out, the reality is some of these products, they have very low margins, and you go to the business community, they'll tell you as low as 4%. And businesses and business owners will come back to me and say, look, how do you expect us to do business in 4%, right? But what we have done is to ensure affordability and to ensure that the impact of imported inflation doesn't hit the average Fijian consumer's pocket. What we do is we put in place safeguards and measures by limiting margins. Then you've got the second question which Geraldine asked, which is on price gouging. Now, price gouging does not apply on price control items, simply because price control item is determined by the FCCC. So we determine and we give the prices. We make the necessary checks and balances. Yes, we do give price increases when it is justified. If there is a justification, we have to be fair and pass those costs on. Else, you will experience a shortage in the market. Right? You go back about 4 or 5 years, Tonga had a huge shortage of sugar. It's because the authority there had fixed the price of sugar based on international prices that was 3 months old. That did not correspond to what the market was at that time. And so there was a huge shortage of sugar in Tonga. So if price control not done properly will lead to shortages. And it is for that reason, if a trader lodges a submission in the morning, by the afternoon or the next day, the FCCC can assess and give you a price. So we look at price control slightly differently, right? When you look at items that are under price control, traders cannot increase the price without our authorization. And if you look at things like flour, right, there has been no increase during the last pandemic or this pandemic. If you look at things like bread, right, long loaf, it's costing the same when it was before and now. So what we do is we have specific products in categories that we have fixed. For example, if you go to a bread shop and you come back and say, look, you should regulate the price of cream bun, my question to you would be, is that considered one essential? Two, what end of the market consumes that? Is that a basic necessity? If not, then the market forces should determine the prices. And that is what a market-based economy is. As for price gouging, these apply on non-price control items because the FCCC does not directly regulate them. So we don't go to a business and say, this is the amount of markup you should charge. So businesses are left free to charge whatever sort of markup they want. But there is a caveat there. You cannot artificially increase the price. Yes, there are forces of demand and supply. Yes, the market moves. The supply side, sometimes there's contraction on the supply side, so you can't supply enough. There's surges in demand. Now, what happens is, and this is where the demand side of consumers become very important. Things like rushing to buy. Panic buying is a good example. Now, when you as consumers rush to buy and there's panic buying, that gives a signal to the supply side. People don't care about the price, they just want the quantity that they demand, right? Any economist will be able to tell you, and I'm surprised why a lot of economists are not saying this, because usually you'd find economists making all these statements about how prices work. So economists can tell you this is a basic function of, you learn this in Form 3, Form 4 economics, right, in high school, quantity demanded versus price. So when people rush to look at the quantity that they demand and they want food, they don't really look at prices. So what they do is there's a surge in demand, and the suppliers, what they try and do is they try and raise the price. Our job is to come in, and it's a reactive measure, is to look at if somebody has increased the price, was it artificially driven? An example is say prices of sugar, right? Because of the logistical supply chain, there's some traders that became very mischievous. 11 of them are currently under investigation. Look at prices of face masks, right? The surgical mask used to go for $2, I think, or $1 or $2 as soon as the second wave hit. Now, there are two ways in which you can regulate the market. One is, of course, by hands-on price control. The other way in which, or tool that we use to regulate the market, is competition. So in partnership with the Ministry of Commerce, we approached the private sector and said somebody needs to be a market disruptor. We've got a particular trader, Ray Pharmaceuticals. They got about 500,000 pieces of surgical mask, and now they're retailing it at 50 cents across their pharmacy. Now $2 to 50 cents, that is without us imposing price control. That is a market-based solution. We are constantly looking at market-based solutions, and that is why we discourage things like panic buying, because any demand surges will put an upward pressure on prices.
Mr. Abraham, if we could look at online trading, given the current COVID situation around the country, many businesses have had to resort to e-commerce. How does the FCCC monitor that?
So we are quite lucky that our particular legislation, when it was done, there was no mention of a brick and mortar type business. It just said a person shall not in trade or commerce, and that is how it was defined. And so that covers the virtual space as well. So the rules of a usual business that is operating in a shop at a physical location is also applicable to somebody that's online. Previously, over the years, we've prosecuted online traders, peak window creation being one. We took them to court on several matters, and we got the charges to stick, and so they faced a penalty and a fine. Similarly, there are businesses that are now resorting to e-commerce. The e-commerce in, say, if you look at the supermarket industry, you've got Max Value and RB, Food City. There's very few of them that actually have an e-commerce platform, right? Where you can go order online, and then they can deliver it to your house. Of course, it's a different modus of operation, right? The mode of operation is totally different from when you would actually walk into a supermarket and pick things up. But the rules of consumer protection still apply equally. So anybody facing any issues, any difficulties can lodge complaints with us, and we have received complaints from people. Now the other one, which is slightly worrying for us, is there are businesses now popping up on social media. Now this is to do with two things. One, these are already legitimate businesses like hardware shops that are saying, look, we will now accept orders online. So they post their flyer on Facebook or Instagram, and people can call in and order. Then there are new startups that are coming in. And so what's been happening is people have been accepting payments or taking money but not delivering the item. So that is a breach of Section 88 of the FCCC Act. We've got a few items reported to us, a few traders reported to us. Now the enforcement challenge there is to be able to pin that down to a physical person and prove that it was this particular person that did it. Because today getting an Instagram account or Facebook account is easy, right? And so how do you remove the veil, the digital veil that exists, and ensure that you are able to hold the person accountable? That therein is an enforcement challenge. We do seek assistance from the Financial Intelligence Unit. We do work with the Consumer Council of Fiji, the Ministry of Commerce, the Reserve Bank. We work with cybercrime just to make sure that we are able to police this properly.
Stay with us. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back to the show. Mr. Abraham, let's talk about the FCCC's role in trying to resolve issues with supply chain disruptions. You mentioned a bit about this earlier. We'd just like to get into a bit more detail. One of the examples, let's talk about the Fiji Meat Industry Board, having recently told FBC News that the second wave has taken away at least 70% of livestock supply from farmers. So talk to us about some of the difficulties in maintaining these supply chains and what the FCCC has done.
Sure. Supply chains are quite difficult because it's product to product, it differs, right? So if you look at the Fiji meats example, it's about local sourcing. Then you get the cattle or the goat or the sheep to the abattoir, have it slaughtered, get the carcass to the butcher then does their cuts and they sell it off the butcher now. Due to the lockdowns, people are also reluctant to go to too many places. So if somebody wants to buy something, they just want to go to the supermarket. If you look at vegetable sales out of supermarkets, they've increased. Because previously, the demand patterns where people would rarely buy vegetables inside the supermarket. They'd actually go either to a roadside stall or to the main markets. Now, people are getting more cautious, and so the demand patterns have increased. And so you'll see, when you walk into supermarkets, you'll see more and more vegetables being available. Because people want to go to one place and get it. And because of that, people are also, that used to go to butchers, are not going to butchers anymore. So the sales for butchers is reduced. As such, they're not buying cattle and sheep and goat, and as such, Fiji meats may be struggling, right? Then you look at something that is sourced internationally, like rice. Right? I've seen a lot of posts about rice on social media, so let's talk about rice. So if you look at the price per metric ton in November 2020, it was about around $445 per metric ton. Now that has increased to about $525 per metric ton in March. So one, there is a upward movement in price. Now an upward movement in commodity price shows you, one, that there is a surge in global demand. So a surge in global demand means countries that can afford, that have a bigger population base, that have a larger demand. The private companies in these countries will be buying, placing orders and getting it. And as such, the companies that we have in Fiji, what they are left to do is ensure that they have got good relationships with their suppliers. And so that continues to come. So in Fiji, we've got our rice supply chain goes to Singapore, Thailand and Vietnam. Now historically it used to be only Thailand and Vietnam. Now we started getting it out of Singapore as well. So the businesses are also adapting, and there has been movements in supply chain. Now the other thing that is causing disruptions is the global freight rates. So globally, if you look at it, and it's not a Fiji phenomena, globally freight companies have increased the rates of transporting simply because, one, contamination, decontamination. You still have to pay people. You will have crews on deck. If your vessel is caught in contamination, then you basically have to isolate somewhere outside. So you still have to pay your people. Now all this is adding to the cost along the supply chain. Locally, domestically speaking, say a company that used to be able to go to a factory and get flour or get sugar or whatever products. Now what they're having to do is they're having to change 4 drivers, so they need to then incur this additional cost, to ensure safety of people. So safety is taking a primary role, and everything else is following. And as such, we are looking at certain disruptions in supply chain. So at Fiji, historically, our supply chain from factory to retail shelf is on a timetable basis. So things like panic demand will cause a disruption in that, right? Not being able to get people to the manufacturing company also has issues. So now you're required to operate in different bubbles. Companies are required to provide transport, ensure the employees have care Fiji apps on. So what this does, it has a certain degree of cost to the business, and so what it's doing is it is also disrupting the normal supply chain and the supply cycles. Now that being said, businesses are adapting well. So if you see things like flour prices, the prices have not changed or not increased, but it is essential that we need to continue the collaboration and discussions that we have with the private sector. And as I had said previously, we've had 76 different instances where we've gone in and helped businesses fix the supply chain. Now one thing I can assure is globally the orders that we are placing, food items are still coming in. So Fiji is food secure. Locally people said, oh, there's a shortage of sugar. There's no shortage of sugar. On a daily basis we get an update from FSC as to how much sugar is produced and then sent out.
Since you mentioned sugar, I would like to ask this question. Looking at certain areas, depending on what the COVID situation is like on the ground at that point in time, of course, like you said, the supply chain does get disrupted by all of these restrictions. But what about the traders themselves putting limits and making sure that they don't run out of their own stock before the next supply comes in?
Yeah. So there have been instances where people have come to us and they said, look, we got things like, say, sugar. Classical example, let's take sugar. I've purchased XYZ amount and it's for my customers because they come and buy it. But what's happening is we've got these smaller canteens. They're coming and they're buying 3 trolleys worth of sugar. I'm going to run out of supply and I'm going to have shortages because I'm getting it at a cheaper price, and these guys will take it and sell it at a higher price. And they don't have the ability, see, small canteens and corner shops don't have the ability to send trucks all the way to Lotoka to get sugar. So what they do is they will go and try and get as much. And so in order to ensure availability of items, what we have done, we've looked at businesses and we've relaxed the requirements and said, look, you can ration out items that you feel needs to be rationed out, but you must not place conditions like you need to purchase $50 worth of food, then you can buy it. Those requirements are a no-no. If one person wants to buy it, they can buy it. If 4 people from the same household want to come and buy it, they can buy it, right? I mean, a lot of Fijian consumers are very mischievous in that way. So look, everybody from the household coming and purchasing it. But the demand for these items is as such. I mean, one thing I've noticed, first wave and the second wave, is Australia has its toilet paper, Fiji has sugar, right? So in Australia you find people going away with toilet paper. In Fiji, people run after sugar. I guess it's our culture of drinking tea and all, you know. So perhaps it is because of that. But also keeping in mind that there is a negative health impact of overconsumption of sugar as well, right? And so we are also looking at that angle as well.
Stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back to the show. Mr. Abraham, last time you were here, we spoke about illegal pyramid schemes and all of the other issues that were going on. Now that a lot of people are unemployed, people don't have enough income coming in, a lot of people are poverty-stricken, it's likely that we will see a rise in these illegal schemes going around. Talk to us about some of the ongoing investigations that the FCCC is currently doing into these schemes and any other issues or complaints that are still coming in.
Sure. I mean, we have not let the pyramid scheme, the guys that perpetrated the pyramid scheme, the core group, and they're not getting off the hook. The teams are still investigating that. We have issued notices to mobile companies so that we are able to get proper warrants and be able to get details of the people that were sending money through, say, platforms like the M-Pesa. And so that is still ongoing. We are quite optimistic that we will be able to lay charges as soon as things normalize and the courts open up. Apart from that, we've noted an increase in online scams, especially phishing scams. So phishing scams work in Fiji. A lot of people may have seen that people are sending you links of Toyota 80th birthday and you won a prize. Again, if it is too good to be true, it probably is, So before you go on clicking the link, it's important to ask yourself or ask the person, what is this for? You ask the relevant question. Because as soon as you click on the link, what happens is it is able to capture a lot of your personal details. So those are what phishing scams are. And that is on the rise. We do discourage people from participating in or clicking those. The other ones that people are now getting, there's an increase in people from all over the world that have millions of dollars in a bank somewhere that their uncle or auntie left and they can't get it out, so they need your help, and they'll give you a few $1 million if you'll send them a small fee to pay the lawyer. Unfortunately, people are still falling for it. Again, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Please don't get sucked into this get rich quick schemes. These things are scams, and they will only take you and your hard-earned dollars.
Mr. Abram, on that note, I watched a BBC documentary a few days ago, and this was regarding a major corporation that had actually built itself up from the ground up based on a pyramid scheme. And because of that, it went global, and currently it's still in operation. They've launched out from just the gifting schemes into offering online education courses. And I say that with quotes because, of course, that's all a scam. And there have been countries around the world that have now banned these particular organizations. Is there any chance that something like that could come into effect in Fiji as well, where you could identify certain organizations that may be linked to these pyramid schemes and then have them prosecuted and maybe ban them as well?
Yeah, some of these issues become cross-border issues. So I give you an example. The pyramid scheme that we are looking at currently, now the FCCC has actively partnered with the New Zealand Commerce Commission to investigate some of these cases, as well as the ACCC, because there are instances of money being sent out of Fiji to either Australia or New Zealand. And so some of these things that become cross-border issues, it's an issue of jurisdiction. If somebody is sitting somewhere in Australia and they're going online and offering courses to somebody in Fiji, the FCCC will not be able to go and get that person to justice here in Fiji. So we'll need to liaise with the ACCC and make sure that we are able to get to the root of the problem. Because until and unless we go and eradicate the root of the problem, this person will take on a new persona and do the same thing. Scams, if you start reading, they may originate out of Europe, out of the Americas, goes down to Australia, and then eventually finds its way into the Pacific. That's how it's been. The pyramid scheme is no different. It started off in the US, the blessing loom, right? And it made its way down into Fiji. It's called the ko. I mean, names may change, but it's practically the same thing. So these things become very worrying for us. And what we do is we do raise advocacy. We have also reached out to the Online Safety Commission just prior to this pandemic to provide some assistance to the FCCC in taking our people through training. And we will be with the intention of partnering with the Online Safety Commission so that we are able to look at issues that happen on the online space that are affecting everyday Fijians. So as we move along, we find that we need to have a holistic approach, and as such we need strategic partnerships to be able to tackle these issues.
Just very quickly bringing it back to something that you had mentioned in the previous segments. This is about FCCC helping out in essential business protocol monitoring. Exactly how is this going to be enforced, and with all of the fines that may be passed down to both businesses and to consumers, and also the possibility of business closure? Could you clarify on what that would mean? What would the FCCC be doing? And also, when it says business closure, it's not a suspension of their license, it's just the business closing down.
Yeah. So thank you. What we've been doing is we've been going around looking at businesses. So they apply for a permission to operate, and once they're given, we get the list. Now historically, our enforcement approach has been our people will go out. Now the problem with that is, if you look at the Suvarnasori corridor, we've got a finite number of people, and after and these people have been with FCCC for some time. Some of them have been with us from PIB days. Now, going out on inspections on a day-to-day basis, businesses know them by face. So when somebody walks in, then they start making sure that they're checking everything. So what we've done is we are looking at also creating an employment opportunity for people who want to do voluntary attachments with us, but at the same time we pay them a certain allowance. And so this would be what we term as mystery shoppers, right? So they'd walk in and walk out. Businesses would have no idea of knowing who these people are. And their job will be to ensure that they go through the process and see whether a particular business is following the protocols or not. Now the intention must be very well understood. The intention is we are going through a public health crisis. Should somebody be COVID positive, we want to be able to easily identify, put them in isolation, and everybody that they have come in contact with. That is the idea, and there is no other reason why we're doing this. Right? It is about keeping all Fijians safe. And so businesses, sometimes the directors will say, look, we put in all the measures, but when you go down to the front of the store, the person that's actually supposed to be doing it is not doing it. You know, maybe the work is monotonous, maybe it's tedious, maybe it's that time of the day that they just don't care anymore. So what we're doing is we're making sure that we are out and about and we go as ordinary consumers, and that is the element of surprise. So once we find out a business is non-compliant, we'll alert them that look, you are non-compliant, right? The Parliament has recently looked at non-wearing of face masks and other things as offences, but there are certain things that when businesses wanted to operate, they have made some sort of arrangements with the Ministry of Commerce. So there's some non-negotiable protocols that will do X, Y, Z. Now if businesses are failing, then the Ministry of Commerce is well within its right to say, look, I will withdraw my the authority or approval I've given to you to operate. And that is where the FCCC comes in, to be able to be the conduit between the ministry that is giving the approvals and the businesses that are operating. Because we come in from a consumer safety perspective, because at the end of the day we want to ensure that all Fijians are safe. Right? Our people are out on the ground every day. Yes, there is a risk that they may also be exposed. We do take in necessary measures to ensure that they have face masks on, that they follow all the protocols, they have sanitizers, they wash their hands, etc. But while they are in a particular premises checking for prices, checking for availability of stock, checking the bulks and the warehouses, we also want to be able to check and ensure that consumers coming in also have that degree of safety.
Right.
And that is why we are helping the ministry enforce this.
When we come back from our break in our final segment, we'll talk about some landlord and tenancy issues as well. Stay with us. This is our final segment, and let's talk about some landlord and tenancy issues. So at the moment, a lot of people that are renting are not able to pay their rents. We hear about it, as media personnel, we hear about it all the time. People call us up and complain that, there's just no money to pay rent. There's hardly any money to put food on the table for them. Are you receiving a lot of issues from your landlords who may have other payments to make? They need their rental payments done on time.
Before Mr. Abraham gets into that, I'd just like to add on to what Ziad has said, but also keeping in mind, precariously, I happen to be in both sides of the boat, both as a landlord and as a tenant in separate houses. There's also this issue where I have experienced, and I've also heard from other people, that landlords have heard of these absolutely fantastical claims that there have been maintenance issues that have popped up overnight that require urgent, changes, but because of COVID restrictions, they may not be able to attend to it. And tenants are now not paying the rent. One, of course, like Ziad said, because there's no money coming in, and second, they're using that as an excuse that they will not pay. So what about both of those instances?
Yeah, I mean, the type of complaints we get, in fact, covers, we get a broad spectrum of cases. So one may think that the complaints may only be coming from tenants. In fact, we get complaints from landlords. So in all aspects of the market, and it's true for everything, there are good people and bad people on both sides, right? So not all landlords are bad and not all tenants are good, right? The instances, there's one that we are currently investigating, this elderly landlord, right? Within the suburbs of Suva. He's got a tenant. The tenant has told him, I'm not going to pay you anything, and if you report me, I'm going to beat you up. So that is currently being investigated. I mean, of course, it's an allegation at this point in time. So there's things that are as serious as that. Then there are issues where landlords are calling us up and saying, look, my tenant is not paying. One, the tenant has not received any pay cut. He is still working. The husband, the wife still working, and they're not paying up. Right? So yes, they are truant tenants, but there are some genuine ones that have suffered difficulty. And previously, I have made statements, and I've said, look, while we understand this is a private contract between the landlord and tenants, one, we recommend that they come to some sort of an agreement, either looking at a rent reduction, or if you cannot pay, maybe a rent deferment program. What you can do is you can sign on and say, look, I can't pay you now, but I will pay it at some point in time in the future. So then that gives a degree of stability to the landlord as well. There's partial rental that's coming in, and the others that can be delayed. So we're trying to find solution on a case-by-case basis, and we've received quite a number of complaints. Most of them are not direct complaints, but they are a cry for help. And so what we do is on a case-by-case basis, we try and help them. There have been instances where landlords have resorted to cutting the water pipes out, right, or closing the meter, or turning the electricity off. Right? Now these things are mischievous things, and so what we've done is on a case-by-case basis. Luckily for all Fijian consumers, the FCCC has an excellent business continuity plan. So even before the pandemic hit, what we had done is we'd stationed people in different towns and cities in Fiji. So regardless of where the complaint comes in, we've got somebody on the ground to be able to respond to those complaints. And so we're sending people out. As soon as we receive complaints, say on the phone, we're sending people out on the ground to be able to go and undertake mediation. Now, of course, there are issues where some landlords have reported to be increasing rent, not issuing agreements, and then tenants, of course, are saying, look, I won't pay my until this is fixed. And so when you get into the details, you find that it's totally about something else. And so we look at it on a case-by-case basis, because there's not a one-size-fits-all kind of approach for this.
Before we wrap up, just quickly, you mentioned the rent reduction, but with the rent freeze being in place, would that be just something that is supposed to be temporary until the COVID situation improves, or is that something that, that after the COVID situation becomes a little bit better and people are able to get back to paying rent on time, that you will have to revert to paying full rent?
The definition of rent increase is not to say I've given you a discount and then I can't put it back up. So if the rent was 800, right, and during this time the landlord has said, look, only pay me 400, you can pay me the 400 later, right? There's deferment. Or the landlord will say, okay, you only pay 600 now. When this is over, we'll go back to 800. Now you can't go over the 800 mark. That is rent increase as per the definition in the law. Going from 600 back to 800 will not constitute a rent increase, and that is why we encourage landlords to keep records. We encourage both parties to keep agreements and for issuance of receipts. Now, that being said, we are also not only looking at investigating landlords, we have also started investigating some tenants. In fact, we are in the process of laying charge against one particular tenant that we found is operating quite unethically, and they fall within the ambits of the law. So we are doing all of that as well. The FCCC exists to ensure fairness in the market. We want to ensure the tenants are protected, we want to ensure the landlords are protected, we want to ensure that everybody in Fiji is protected. Businesses are protected, consumers are protected.
On that note, we've reached the end of our show. Mr. Abraham, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to have you back sometime.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoy the show tonight. Please remember, stay safe, stay at home, and have a good evening. Thank you for joining us.